Hi, welcome to Congregation L'Dor Va-Dor's Touch of Torah. Tonight we have Rabbi Barry Silver, and we're going to be talking about Deuteronomy KI TAVO, and we're getting ready for the high holidays. So this is a interesting parsha. Take it away, Rabbi.
Thank you, Sharon. Thanks for organizing this and arranging it by Zoom, and thank you everybody for joining with us. I'm very interested in hearing your take on these things and on what's going on in the world, but I'll start out with my review of KI TAVO. KI TAVO means when you come in, when you enter. It's talking about the Jewish people when they enter the land of Israel. So Moses is trying to get them prepared, get them ready, because according to the Torah, Israel is sacred ground. So no longer will they be in a foreign nation. No longer will they be slaves. No longer will they be wanderers. They will now be the occupants of the holy ground, the sacred nation of Israel, and therefore they have to behave accordingly and live up to certain standards. So Moses is getting them ready for it. And he says that there's a bunch of blessings and curses in the Torah reading. But the first part of it starts out with the concept that it would do us well to appreciate and to internalize. Most of us think that if you pay money to a real estate broker or to a homeowner, you get to buy a house, and that house is yours, and you're the 100% owner. The Torah didn't quite have that concept. In the Torah, the Jewish people did not own their own land. It's kind of like the Native American concept. They believed that the whole earth belonged to God, and they were occupants. And so they were able to use that land, and they had some rights to it, but ultimately it wasn't theirs. And therefore, because of that, they had an obligation to pay back, to give part of their land or the produce of their land to others. And so the Torah says, KI TAVO, when you come to the land of Israel and you have a farm, you have land, you must give some of the crops, some of the food that you grow on your land to the stranger, to the orphan, to the widow. And so you could say that this is the precursor of the modern day income tax. Now, the amount that you were given in English comes out to a tithe. In Hebrew, the word is related to the word eser, meaning 10. So you give a tenth. And so the word tithe comes from the word tenth. So you're supposed to give a tenth. But you also had to make your land available and open to people, the widow, the orphan, the stranger, and they would be able to come and provide for their needs from your land. We don't know if this was really practiced. It would have been kind of radical to just let anybody that wants to come onto your land and start picking food. But we have reason to believe that this really did occur and that this represents a Jewish ideal. Then there's the part with the blessings and the curses. Deuteronomy is really big into this, trying to get people to obey God. So if you obey his commandments, all these great things will happen. You'll be fruitful, you'll multiply, your crops will grow, your wife will have many children, your kids will reproduce. If you do the wrong thing, then it's all over. The enemies are going to come and wipe you out. You're going to grow food, but you're going to try to grow food, it won't work. There'll be drought. If you do produce food, your enemies are going to come in and kill you and take your food. So it's like really bad news if you mess with God. So these kind of things we chalk up to rather primitive beliefs. But the concept in KI TAVO that the land is miraculous, it's wondrous, it's something that we shouldn't take for granted, and that we shouldn't feel this is ours to do what we want with, that we have an obligation to use the land and to use what we're able to produce to help other people. It's a very good concept. It's a Jewish concept. We should be very proud that we brought this concept to the world. And The other ones about the blessings and the curses, obviously, if you follow certain rituals, that doesn't guarantee good things. And if you fail to follow them, bad things. But it's kind of the beginning of a moral climb in which we do recognize that if we do the right thing, it'll have good consequences. And if we do the wrong thing, it'll have bad consequences. So this is step one in getting to that stage. That's about all I need to say, I believe, about Ki TAVO. And now I'll open it up to other folks. You may have a different opinion about the blessing and the curses. Maybe you think there really is somebody up there watching out for us and zapping us if we do wrong and rewarding us if we do well. I'd be interested in hearing your take on that, as well as the part about our obligation to give back some of the produce of what we've been fortunate enough to produce and to receive. So I'll open it up to everybody else, and please feel free to share your thoughts.
I know one of the things in Ki TAVO, Rabbi, is about the miracles. Rabbi Moses is talking about all the miracles that the Jews had during their wanderings, kind of repeating them so that they can remember them, as they go forward. So,
Yeah,
things
that's
that
a good
happened in
concept. Yeah, the Jewish people are referred to as Am Kadosh and Am Segula, means a holy people and a treasured people. Yes, you're right. That's a big part of Ki TAVO. It accepts that the Jews are chosen by God, and therefore these miracles that occurred were performed by God on behalf of the Jews because the Jews are his chosen people. And a way that we can look at this that makes sense in the modern world is that every single day of our life is a miracle. There's all types of miraculous things happening within our bodies and the outside world that make life possible. And we should try to view life in that way. If we really understand how wondrous everything is, we'll have much greater appreciation for the simple things in life, and we'll appreciate when things go well. A lot of times people just notice, oh, my back is hurting, or oh, this doesn't work. How often do we say, hey, you know what? I was able to walk today. That's pretty good. My eyes were working really well. I could see wondrous sights. I could hear sounds. That's really good. Usually we just think about the things that are going wrong, but all these things that go right, they're all quite miraculous. And it wouldn't hurt us to study medicine and science so we could know even more in detail how wondrous these things are. But if we don't want to go and study the medical journals, we can just accept what the doctors and scientists are telling us, that it's all quite wondrous. So thanks for bringing up that point as well. But I am curious, do you think I'm a little too harsh on the biblical concept of God? Should I not question such a thing, or is that okay? I don't want to burst the bubble of too many people, but somehow I have a habit of doing that.
Can you possibly give a 30-second synopsis? I was trying to get on and my computer wouldn't open.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, the Torah is saying that when we get to Israel, we should behave in a moral and a righteous way, because it's holy ground. And so when we get there, we should consider the land that we have not to be ours, but to belong to God. And we're caretakers, and therefore we have an obligation to take some of what the land produces and share it with other people. It also tells us that if we do the right thing and follow God's word, we're going to be rewarded. Good things will happen. And if we don't follow his instructions, very bad things are going to happen to us. Enemies will overtake us, and our crops won't give fruit, and the women will be barren, and all types of terrible things. But if we do the right thing, we'll rout our enemies, and our harvest will yield great fruit, and everything will be fine for us. And then, as Sharon mentioned, the Torah also in this passage mentions again that the Jews were considered holy people, Am Segula. And I said that we could view all of our species as special, treasured people, that we have these wonderful qualities and traits and characteristics of being able to think and be able to plan for the future and have free will. And so every one of us, each person is really a Segula. We're born with wonderful qualities. All right.
Yep,
So
Rabbi.
do you want to comment on that? And if not, we can move on to current events.
I think Nancy and Homer both wanted to say something. Nancy, you had
Okay.
your hand raised? Wait a minute. Wait, you're muted. Okay. Go ahead, Nancy.
I just think it is a more intelligent way, the way what we're accepting now. Although sometimes having been, had a lifelong idea of a supreme being, sometimes that pops up, but then you say, oh yeah, we know, we really have a better idea now of how it is. But whoever wrote these passages, there are some wonderful ideas. And the idea of being charitable and taking care of people and so forth, I think is a gift, and it's a gift to share with others and to teach. And I have to say, before we left, not Mimosa, the other, now I'm having a senior moment. The other hall,
Mariposa?
there was a woman,
Mariposa.
Mariposa. There was a woman that I was talking with from there, and she says, you know something, I always feel more intelligent after I come to these services. So
Yeah. Well,
you get a realistic interpretation without all the fairy tales and fantasies.
well, thanks, Nancy. I think a lot of people feel their intelligence is being insulted when they're told certain things by the ministers and rabbis and imams. And most people think that if you don't believe in a supernatural being, that's really disillusioning, and it's very morbid, and it's very it's very despondent, and that it's not uplifting. But what I try to show each week is that if we look at the world through the eyes of science and reason and love and Jewish values, the world can seem just as miraculous, if not more so, without having to try to make ourselves believe things that aren't really true.
Absolutely. And I think people who are ready to receive the message accept it.
They do. And there's many people who react very vigorously against it and are very, very upset about it. And it's kind of like if you tug on the security blanket of a little child and they really feel secure with that blanket and you're tugging on it, they get really mad. And so some people do get really mad. And
well, I know there's still some of that. I still retain a bit of what's having a lifetime and then changing. Every once in a while that myth pops up, but I know I can push it away. I know that's not
Nancy, what you're
my rationale anymore.
What you're talking about is very interesting. It's summed up in a concept called mindfulness, which I'll be talking about on the high holidays. What you're talking about is there's thoughts coming up, and instead of just running with them, you're actually evaluating them, and you're running them through your conscious mind, which most people don't do, which is very interesting. I think that that's very valuable. So, I also like to believe certain things that would be nice if they were true, and sometimes I like to, pretend like certain things could be true. I do that when I watch Star Trek. I'm watching Star Trek, and somebody, I remember I used to be watching Star Trek, and I'd be in the middle of the show. It's like really intense, and somebody says, they're just actors, and I'm saying, don't tell me that. Don't tell me they're just actors. I don't want to know. Oh, that's actually Leonard Nimoy. I don't want to know that. I'm into the show. I'm like there, and I'm living what's happening. I don't want to sit around and think, oh, this is just some script that somebody wrote, and here's an actor. And so when people say that they believe in these concepts like a God watching over them, I can relate to that, because I like to imagine that Star Trek could be true, or or Superman really came from Krypton. No, I can get into that as much as the next guy, but I choose not to get lost in that. And I know after I'm done watching that it was a TV show. The problem is there's some people that are believing these concepts and they can't separate reality from
Right.
fiction. And then it gets to be a problem. But it is fun to pretend and to play make believe. I like that as much as the next guy, but I think it's really important that we know we can separate reality from fantasy.
Homer, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I was just going to say on the peoplehood and the being chosen. I think everybody's chosen, but it's kind of like, for instance, I saw on 9/11, a Black man put on Facebook that all buildings matter. And you get the idea that this is our book, and so it's written to us, not to the Christian down the street who also is chosen for whatever their particular thing may be. So yeah, we're all chosen in some fashion or another. And as far as the blessings and the curses, I think your dharma causes your karma. So I think for me, I think I've always said I'm a pretty close to a deist whose God makes occasional cameos in the world, but in general, I think God set up natural laws, and the world follows those natural laws. So when a hailstorm damages my house, I don't blame God. It's the weather, and that's just the way that it happened. And he wasn't out to get me. It just happened that my house happened to be in the way of that cloud that had the whatever. So and the same way with the curses. I think when you do good, when you put good out there, when you help other people, when you're friendly to other people, when you smile, etc., I think it comes back to you. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, tell me, when you say that we're all chosen, it sounds like you reject the concept that there's some being out there who's choosing any one group of people. That doesn't sound very egalitarian. So you don't accept that concept, right?
Well, I think I accept it. I just think somebody doesn't have to be wrong for somebody else to be right. So the egalitarian part, I mean, I think I can be chosen to be a Jew and to do my walk on this planet and my duties to others and to God on this planet as a Jew. And I think the Christian down the street can be chosen to do the very same thing.
Yeah.
And
well, that's putting in a good light. But the Torah is saying something a little different than what you're suggesting. What the Torah is saying is that there's only one group of people that's chosen. Those are the Jews, and they're chosen above all the others. In fact, this passage says it too, that God chose the Jews over all the people, and the Jews will have special blessings that the others don't have. They also have special responsibilities. So if they mess up, they're going to be punished quite severely. The other people, God doesn't expect much out of them, so they don't have to live up to these high expectations. But the Torah is pretty clear that only the Jewish people are Am Kadosh, Am Segula. We're chosen. But I like your concept, and I think it's a healthier concept and it's more accurate to suggest that every group is chosen in some way, or can be. And it makes more sense to think not that we were chosen, but that we did the choosing. Jewish people chose to live a moral life and to try to follow a moral code. And that's more to our credit than if somebody chose us. And every group of people has the ability to do that, to make a choice. But I'm also curious about your concept about God making cameos. Like, when do you think that happened? Do you have a specific example of when you think
no,
God showed up?
I guess I would say, if you take the plagues or the water parting, the sea parting, and those types of things, if you take those literally, it could be those times. And I have times in my own life when I know God was there. I could never prove it to you. But in my own heart and in my own mind, I know that, for instance, one time I was working at a convenience store and I was visited by an angel. Completely disappeared. I bought him something to eat and something to drink, and before he could have gotten out of my sight, he was completely gone. And so, I see things like that. I know when God, it just, yeah. Like I said, I don't think I can prove it to you, but that's okay. It works for me, I guess I could say. And you were talking about the medical and the science. I mean, if you look at things, for instance, you look at circumcision. If you do circumcision before the 8th day, the child's going to bleed to death. Now, did we come about that by whoops? Oh, that one died. Let's go another day. Whoops, that one died. Let's go another day. And then the 8th day worked really good, because that's the time that with the mother's milk, the vitamin K level is such that now it doesn't happen anymore because we give neonates vitamin K. Or the fact that there are only 4 animals listed that have 1 but not 2 characteristics of kosher animals, and they've never found another species that meets that criteria.
Yeah, well, they have a scientific principle that you might be familiar with, Occam's razor. It's like if you have 2 different explanations, go with the one that is the easiest and doesn't require a lot of other presuppositions. So you got the 8th day for circumcision. And one explanation is that whenever they chose a different day, like you say, or before that, kids kept dying. And in biblical days, if a kid died, it wasn't because they didn't know about germs or medicine or anything else. If a child died, God did it. So therefore, if a child died if they circumcised before the 8th day, God did it. And so they would naturally assume, well, God doesn't want you to circumcise on that day because he just killed this kid and he's killing a lot of them. So it would make sense that if children survive better after the 8th day, they would think, okay, that's God's law. That's an easier explanation than to say that God wrote the Torah and determined that you should be circumcised on the 8th day. So Occam's razor tends to support the view that this was something that occurred because people noticed some bad consequences. As far as your angels departing, you're right. It would be hard to convince me, but I'm glad you're convinced. Anybody else?
Jeff has his hand raised. Go
Go
ahead,
ahead, Jeff.
Jeff.
Oh, yeah. Rabbi, this isn't what I wanted to ask you, but you might also want to mention to Dr. Brooks the fact that circumcision was originally a much less radical procedure than we have now. It was radicalized by the Hasmoneans, well, the Maccabees.
Very good. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, but you know that. That's why I'm sure you know more about it than I do, which is why I thought you might want to explain it to me.
Okay, and what else?
Do you have any sort of concept of a higher reality or consciousness, or do you think of yourself as a materialist?
Neither one. I'm not sure what you mean by a higher reality. Do you want to try to explain what that means? I think I know, but I'm not sure.
Well, I think you do.
I don't know.
You know,
I mean, there's some consciousness beyond our.
yeah, a consciousness that gives rise to the rest of reality. You know, we have precedents for it in all of the various faiths. Of course, we have the concept of Ein Sof. The Indians have Brahman, the concept of the Tao. It's and I'm still enough. I may be the last perennialist living. I'm still enough of a perennialist that I think that these are all they're all trying to describe the same concept, but as understood through different cultural lenses. Michael Lerner has told me that he conceptualizes God as the totality of all consciousness in the universe. Do you have any sort of conceptualization of that, or are you, as I say, are you a radical materialist?
Well, I'll tell you my thoughts, then you can tell me where I fit into your definitions, because I'm not quite sure. But well, let me just put it to you this way. Let's just start out from the beginning. If you're trying to figure out truth and what really is true and what really is, nothing beats science.
Oh, yeah.
Every time you turn on the light, turn on your car, get in the plane, put on the computer, fly a man to the moon, or a woman. Every time you do that, you're proving the truth of science. Science is incredible for being able to predict the truth and explain the truth. Even the theory of evolution, everything, all the trillions of bits of information all fit in, and it's just unreal. So if you want to know the truth, go with science. Okay. Now, science is rather humble, although many people think it's braggadocio. It's humble. According to science, you don't believe things unless you have evidence for it. And as Carl Sagan used to say, it's okay to say, I don't know. So when it comes to certain things, it's okay to say, the evidence isn't there. Doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, but I don't know. As far as like a supernatural being or something over and above us that generated everything and started it out or is supervising, all the evidence, every last bit of evidence goes against that concept. There's all the evidence is against, none is for it. So the concept of a supernatural being, I don't just think it's not true. I know with an absolute certainty in my heart that it's not true. I don't have any doubts at all.
Okay.
I know that. And if there is somebody watching out for us, he's doing a pretty lousy job.
Oh,
But
yeah,
I do
no, I
know-
would agree with that.
What's that?
I would agree with that.
And I do know also that there's something in the human heart that wants to believe that there is someone watching out for us. And the reason is because there's two reasons. One is anthropologically, we come from primates, and primates look to the alpha male to take care of them.
Yeah.
And the alpha male comforts them. And when humans reached a stage where they realized when they saw a dead human that was going to happen to them, they freaked out. And they realized the alpha male couldn't do anything. So they imagined an alpha male in the sky that could deliver them from death and help them get through that. So I think that was the beginning of religion and this concept of a supernatural being. It's like they took the alpha male, where if you obeyed him, he would reward you. And if you crossed him, he'd kill you or punish you. And he could provide food for you. When there was a kill of the animal, he'd make sure you got it. And if somebody was messing with you, he'd protect you. All of that comes from the alpha male. Now, on top of that, each one of us also, hopefully, not everybody, but hopefully had a father figure who was strong and who protected us when we were little kids. And it reassured us. As we got older, we realized, oh, our dad isn't Superman. And oh, he's not going to be there to take care of us. But in our heart, in our mind, in our psyche, we still had this concept, and it reassured us. So there's a desire to believe that there's someone who's like our father, who's going to take care of us and provide.
Yeah.
Of course, there's also the mother who is nurturing and provided for us. And that's why there's a lot of religions that have a female deity. So I know I'm giving you a long answer to your questions. I accept all of that as part of our mythology and part of our human weakness and psyche, trying to draw comfort from something that we're used to. Okay.
Yeah.
As far as a higher being or higher consciousness, I don't accept any such thing.
Okay.
Here's what I believe, and here's what the evidence shows, and it's pretty clear. When the universe started, around 14 billion years ago, there was a singularity. We don't know how big. Was it the size of a pin or a baseball or a softball or a grapefruit, or maybe it was bigger, but there was something rather small, and it was really hot, and it expanded and created all of this. So when that happened, it seems very clear that there's no consciousness behind it. This happened. And then it happened. And then what happened is it developed into galaxies, stars, planets. And on certain planets, life forms grew, and we evolved to the point where we had a mind. And then through that mind, we were able to have consciousness of the universe. So the universe knew itself through us. And with Darwin, then the universe found out how everybody got here and how everything got here. Now, here's another way of thinking about it. So there was no consciousness originally. It evolved over time through us and perhaps countless other beings on other planets. Here's another way to think about it. Take you and me and every person on this planet, right? We started out as an embryo. That embryo, I believe, represents in microcosm the cosmos. Did the embryo know about itself? Did it have a consciousness? Well, you could say, well, maybe. You know, the fertilized egg, even a cell knows other from itself. It has a cell wall, and it can kind of have some awareness that this is outside of me, and there might be some kind of primitive consciousness, but it certainly didn't have a consciousness like we do. It wasn't like aware of what's going on. But gradually the embryo evolved and became us. And the same thing with the universe. The universe evolved and beings evolved that had consciousness. When did the embryo become conscious like we are? It never happened on any particular day or time or hour. It evolved over time. And over time, the universe was able to hear itself when beings evolved ears, could see itself when beings evolved eyes, could think and become aware of itself when beings became self-conscious, and then figured out how we all got here when Darwin came up with it. That's my very long answer to your short question. So I don't believe in anything beyond that, but I believe that what I just described is an incredible, awesome, wondrous miracle that is just as inspiring and stupendous as anything that a believer could chalk up, and more.
I'll just say two things, and then I'll let Dr. Brooks come in because he has his hand up. I didn't mean to imply that it needn't necessarily be of a personal nature. And the second thing was, I forget what the second thing. Oh yes, and I agree that I'm not willing to entirely dismiss. There's a body of anecdotal evidence out there, or anecdote, I don't like to call it evidence, that's conflicting regarding paranormal phenomena and yada yada, and I'm not going to get into that right now because I've taken up enough of your time. But I'm not ready to dismiss all of that. But that being said, I agree with you completely. Science is hands down the best tool we have.
Well,
and now I'll shut up.
No, you haven't monopolized the time. You used the time you were very helpful in sharing some really good ideas and asking some good questions. That's what we want. So I really appreciate that. I can tell you, as far as paranormal experiences, I've had all types of people tell me and really pour their heart out and try to get me to believe it. I don't believe any of it. I don't believe any of the paranormal. No, I don't. I think it's all people who really want to believe, and they have the ability to make themselves believe. So they're not thinking with a critical mind. They're thinking like they want to believe it, and so they have faulty memory or they draw wrong conclusions. But normally the people who say that they've had paranormal experiences, they might not come out and admit it, but they want to believe they had it.
Yeah.
It makes them feel good for some reason. And so anytime you want to believe something, you should be more skeptical of it because there's a confirmation bias.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
I'm not convinced. Okay, who's next?
Okay, well, we sort of gotten a little bit off the original topic, but
Okay, bring us back.
Gnostic texts, when the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, there was a lot of cohesiveness that started to be put back together. The New Testament, where are these born again Christians and the new Christian religion, if you will, was actually put together by, and I've said this before, Constantine and his tribunal, in order to consolidate power in the Holy Roman Empire and negate the strength and the power of the woman, because they wanted to consolidate power. Women were the soothsayers. Women were the caretakers. Women were the birth givers. Women were the givers of life. And they were trying to wrest back power. And when the Gnostic texts started to be reinterpreted after they were found in the mid-20th century and started to put pieces back together, the entire Gnostic text started to come into vision. It started to be cohesive. And it was found that, the Christian religion as it was after Constantine cherry-picked, if you will, bits and pieces in order to make it politically cohesive. It was not the actual truth. It was bits and pieces in order to consolidate power. And it was based on that tribunal from Constantine that the modern Christian religion's foundation was based on. It was not based on the word of God. It was not based on religion. It was not based on relief. It was based on politics. And it grew from there. And if you go back to interpret the Gnostic texts, which they're still doing, it throws a completely different light on the quote unquote, what they call the New Testament. See, there was not a separate book written for Christianity. It was the same book, which they then began to interpret in their own way. Okay,
Well,
and it took off from there. So that's what I'd like to, and the word parlay, also to get off to another topic, as you were saying, many countries in wartime, they parlay. What do you parlay? You discuss, you look into details, you look into ways to come together. And that's also where the word parliamentarian came to be in politics and in other businesses, to discuss, to dissect, to find the most common denominator, to communicate. So.
yeah, you raised very interesting points. I wasn't going to go too much into the Gnostics, but they are fascinating. And I do agree with what you're saying about them. But let me just share with you just a little bit more about the Gnostics, just to pique your interest in case you're not that familiar. Yeah, the Dead Sea Scrolls revealed a lot of new documents about Gnosticism, and it increased our knowledge a lot. One way that we can find out about something is to look at the word itself. Where does the word Gnostic come from? It's Greek. Gnosis means knowledge. And we see it in, like the word in English, to recognize. It means to re-acknowledge or to know again. And in French, it's connaître. In Spanish, conocer. Agnostic means someone who doesn't know. Gnostic means no. Agnostic, someone who doesn't know. So gnosis is Greek. Now, it's not just a Greek word. The Greeks had a religion that was based on Gnosticism. So the Greeks, they would go into their temples and they would have these religious rites. And in these rites, you were transformed. And they had priests and priestesses, and they walked you through different stages, and you were transformed in order to find or to have eternal life. And a lot of these rituals of Greek Gnosticism found their way into Christianity. A lot of them took place in a cave, and the early Christians met in caves. A lot of them involved eating special food like a fish, and the fish was the symbol for Christianity. They even had an acronym, ichthyos, which is Greek for fish, which means Jesus Christos, Son of God in Greek. And then the New Testament starts out in a very interesting way. It says, in the beginning was the Logos. Logos was I guess you would say, the deity of Greek Gnosticism. The Logos is where we get the word biology, anthropology, or eloquent. It means the word, but it means far more than that. It means a word, but it means a study. And it's something like metaphysical, the Logos. And then the Logos in Greek mythology became flesh, and that was us. And the New Testament tracks that language from Greek Gnosticism. The Logos became flesh in Jesus. Now, the Greeks believed that the spiritual was pure and perfect, and the physical was imperfect. They believed that everything you see around us had a perfect form, like a horse, an equus. There was a perfect horse that existed in the metaphysical world. And on earth, you would see various replications, but each one was imperfect. It was a perfect person, a perfect tree, a perfect beetle, a perfect rabbit. But it didn't really exist in the real world. But what they believed is, the Christians said, the Logos actually exists in the real world. The perfect human came to us, and his name was Jesus. They took Greek mythology and wedded it to Jewish religion, and then also mixed in these mythologies of Greeks and Romans and Egyptian and Persians about a man being the descendant of a god and a virgin and being born on December 25th, and having 12 disciples and rising up on the third day. All these different forces fused together to form Christianity. But Greek Gnosticism was the basis. In the Greek Gnostic religion, the perfect form of the human was represented on earth as what they called a daemon. And from daemon, they got a demon. And a demon could be good or could be bad. We only have the knowledge of a bad one. But it's really fascinating to look at the origins of Christianity. And it actually does come from Greek mythology. We did get even further off track now, but I just thought it was kind of interesting to bring that up. All right. Is there anything else anybody wants to say? I think we've gone our time limit, but if there's somebody you'd like to add, I'm glad to take any more comments. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, Rabbi, I wouldn't necessarily equate all of the Greco-Roman mystery religions with Gnosticism, because Gnosticism, as you know, was a specific.
Oh, no, I wasn't equating that. I was saying that Gnosticism existed on its own, but Gnosticism was joined together with these other mystery religions. So what Christianity is, and no, you're right, they're totally distinct. It's a combination of Judaism with its messianic concept, Gnosticism, and these other mythologies. Thanks for clarifying that, because I didn't mean to say that, and these other mythologies all together in Christianity.
And I just wanted to mention that if anyone's interested in this, there's a young guy on YouTube. His name is Andrew Henry, and he just within the last few years, he graduated from Boston University with a doctorate in religion. He has a series on YouTube about 20-30-minute videos about world faith traditions, but he's primarily a scholar of early Christianity. So he does these short, like little mini documentaries on, as I say, all of the world faith traditions, but especially early Christianity. It's called Religion for Breakfast.
That's great. Thank you for telling us about that.
There's also another guy, he's a religious studies scholar in Scandinavia. His name is Philip Holm, and he has another channel, Let's Talk Religion. But he's more Catholic, small c, in his tastes. Henry primarily focuses on early Christianity and some Judaism. You might find it interesting.
You know, everybody has a different take on early Christianity. Shmuley Boteach, the Orthodox rabbi, says, oh, Jesus was really an Orthodox rabbi. And then others says, oh, no, he was a liberal, radical, progressive rabbi. And then other people say, no, he was, started his own religion. He's a Christian. So a lot of people read different things, kind of like the Rorschach test.
Yeah, Shmuley says what he has to in order to promote himself, as you know.
Yeah, that's true. He does.
Yeah.
He's a good self-promoter.
Yeah.
And Valerie is definitely right about Constantine. But I wouldn't give him any credit for writing anything himself. What he did was he found there were a whole bunch of books circulating around about Jesus. And he realized that with all these different stories, there was no cohesion. He couldn't channel that to amass power because it was too diverse. So what he did is he convened a conference and said, okay, guys, I don't really care what you come up with, but come up with something that I can control. So they had all these different books, and he picked people that kind of liked his books. And then they came up with at the council and say, okay, this is the Bible. These books were written by God, and these ones, they're on the cutting room floor, and they weren't. And that's it. So when the fundamentalist Christians say, I have faith, I believe in God, their faith is in Constantine, that he picked the right books and somehow knew which ones were real and which ones aren't. Because the books that he got rid of had all types of wild, crazy notions. I mean, Christian scripture does too. I mean, but, like the book of Revelation, it's like somebody on an LSD trip. But these, he just really created this thing by amassing certain books he liked. And Paul, of course, did the same thing by creating a new religion too. So the early Christianity doesn't have a whole lot to do with Jesus. It's a religion about him by other folks. Anyway, I found this a fascinating discussion. I appreciate your joining in. We have a lot of it's a lot of intelligence on this Zoom call sharing. So I appreciate that very much. Thanks, everybody. Sharon, if you want to.
I want to just
go ahead.
Share that next Tuesday night, we have a touch of Torah and a touch of music with Andrew Sussman. And then we'll have a hiatus from the touch of Torah for 2 weeks due to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We will return after September 20th on October 11th with Rabbi Barry. So we will have a hiatus for 2 weeks. And we welcome you to our Shabbat service on Zoom and YouTube on Friday evenings or live at the Carlisle. And as Rabbi Barry said, our high holidays, we want everyone to join us. Suggested donations are welcome, and we love you to be part of our wonderful High Holy Day services that we're preparing. A lot of work for you. So with that, thank you all.